All right, now let's unpack this. You've brought us some really compelling material today, kind of pulling back the curtain on leadership in a context that's, well, it feels both challenging and pretty high stakes.
That's right. Yeah.
We're diving into the nature of leadership specifically within these apostolic teams that kind of focused on, pioneer church planting.
Exactly. The source material, it's an excerpt from a PDF called Leadership in the Apostolic Task, and it's powerful because it's not just theory. It really weaves together biblical principles with the, let's say, the gritty, practical realities on the ground.
Right.
And it includes personal anecdotes, too, from someone who's clearly, lived this.
And it kicks off with this story, doesn't it? An anecdote that just immediately makes you question the usual ideas about leadership. It's that colonel story.
Yes. The colonel, all puffed up in his new Pentagon office, trying to sound important on the phone.
Uh-huh.
When a sergeant walks in, he's pretending to talk to a general about some big report for the president. It's all about status, projecting importance, the perks.
And the punchline just lands perfectly, doesn't it?
It really does. The sergeant was just there to install his phone line. It's such a stark contrast to the view in this material we're looking at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this source makes it crystal clear, right? In this specific work, this pioneer church planting, leadership is not about being a big shot.
Not at all. It's not about getting more respect or enjoying perks. Actually, the source flat out says those kinds of perks are almost non-existent here.
So if it's not status, what is it about in this demanding context?
Well, the material argues it's really about spiritual gifts, a genuine calling, and a willingness to step up, to take initiative, bear responsibility.
Okay.
It's the hard day-to-day stuff of shepherding, leading, feeding God's people, all aiming towards seeing God work for Christ's glory, especially among people who haven't heard. The core idea really is just servanthood.
Servanthood.
For Christ and for the body he's building.
And the source adds that note about the cost, too, saying the price is high for anyone doing this, but even higher for these apostolic leaders. There's a real weight here.
A significant weight, yeah. And what's interesting is this material isn't trying to be like a general guide to all Christian leadership. It's very specific.
Right.
It deliberately focuses on leadership within these apostolic teams doing pioneer church planting.
So why is leadership called critically important here specifically? What makes it so vital in this setting?
Well, the material anchors this in Scripture. It says the Bible consistently shows that the right kind of leadership is absolutely essential for God's work to really flourish.
Okay.
And for organizations doing this kind of thing, starting churches from scratch, often where there's no existing Christian community, that apostolic task effective team leadership is just fundamental. You need it for clear vision, keeping everyone moving together for the team's spiritual health long term, and just staying focused on the mission.
And the source mentions some organizational principles, like being team leader-centric, and that working in teams is a non-negotiable.
That's right. The structure really leans on the team leader. They're expected to be spiritually qualified, true servant leaders, and crucially, the team actually needs to follow them.
Okay.
Now, teams do get some freedom, entrepreneurial freedom, they call it. They're sort of semi-autonomous to innovate within the bigger non-negotiables and their specific team vision. But that freedom comes with huge responsibility.
So it's not a free-for-all. Team leaders have weighty and sacred responsibility and actual spiritual and organizational authority over team members.
Precisely. But here's the balance, and it's critical. These leaders, even with their authority, are also firmly under authority and oversight themselves.
Oh, okay.
The expectation is they should be eager for coaching and committed to accountability. And the source mentions they've tried to build in ways for team members to be heard, too. It's leader-centric, but not, unchecked power.
Sounds like a system that's always kind of being fine-tuned.
It really does. The source admits it's imperfect, calls it the best they've developed so far to stick to their mission principles. It just highlights that tough spot the team leader is in, accountable up, responsible down, focused out.
Okay, so you have this incredibly important, complex role. What does that actually feel like when you step into it? The source has that great story about training new leaders.
Oh, yeah, this one's so relatable. The trainer, being a bit sneaky, as the source says, asks the new team leaders to just brainstorm everything a good team leader should ideally be doing.
And I bet that list got long fast.
Exploded. They filled several flip chart sheets, apparently.
Give us a feel for it. What kinds of things were on there?
Oh, everything. Meeting individually with team members, handling logistics, keeping your own spiritual life healthy, which is foundational, remember?
Right.
Casting vision, recruiting, setting an example in language learning.
Even language learning. Wow.
Yep. Reporting to your own boss, leading team meetings, admin stuff, communicating back home. It just goes on and on. Evangelism, Bible teaching, team retreats, pastoral needs, managing your own tent-making job or business.
That's a massive juggling act.
It is. Add church planting itself, relationships with other workers, the email mountain. And then, for a bit of dark humor, keep everyone's computers current with the latest software.
Okay, that one definitely hits close to home for anyone managing people. So, seeing this overwhelming list, how did the new leaders react?
The source says they literally slumped in their chairs about half of a foot.
Wow.
And when the trainer asked, okay, who wants to quit right now? Apparently every single hand went up.
That really says something about the sheer weight of that job description.
It does. It's overwhelming. And that's exactly why the trainer immediately brings in the solution, triage. The principle is simple, but kind of brutal. You just cannot do everything.
Right.
You have to take all those expectations from the organization, the team, churches, yourself, and ruthlessly sort them. 3 categories.
The 3 triage categories.
Yep. What you absolutely must do personally, what you must delegate to someone else. And the hard one, what will simply have to be left undone.
Left undone. That sounds both liberating and terrifying.
It really nails the reality of limited time and energy, doesn't it? Especially in these contexts. And the source uses that Super Bowl ticket story. It's dark, but memorable, as an analogy for getting priorities mixed up.
Remind us of that one again.
A guy has this amazing seat for the Super Bowl, finds out it belonged to his neighbor's wife who just died. He asks the neighbor why he isn't using the ticket or didn't give it away.
Yeah.
And the neighbor says they're all at the funeral.
Oof. Yeah, okay. Priorities completely backward.
It's a really stark way to show how easily urgent things or less important things can just completely derail you from what actually matters most.
So let's dig into that first triage category, the must-do. What does the source say are the absolute essentials a team leader has to keep personal responsibility for?
Right. These are the 6 core things the author argues are non-negotiable, the stuff the leader has to do themselves, even if other things may suffer.
Okay, essential number 1, be spiritually healthy. Seems obvious, maybe, but the source really hammers this.
It does, and it's totally foundational. Their argument is you could work insane hours, tick off everything on that massive list, but if you're not spiritually healthy, the work is ultimately without spiritual profit. It's the source, the wellspring. So it's more than just being busy for God. It's maintaining that personal connection with God. Daily, quiet times, prayer, Bible reading explicitly called not a luxury. It means dealing honestly with sin, not letting stuff build up and block that fellowship with God, or, as 1 John puts it, walking in the light.
And the biggest enemy of that?
It's tyranny of the urgent, all those demands, right, all those flip chart tasks just screaming for attention, and they can easily crowd out the truly important, maybe less loud work of tending your own soul. This source points to Luke 10, Jesus and Martha.
Oh, worried and bothered.
Exactly. Only one thing is necessary. It's a constant battle to protect that space for your spiritual life.
That tyranny of the urgent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it resonates. Okay, essential number 2, cultivate vision and faith.
The source quotes the Wall Street Journal here, defining vision as an acute sense of the possible, seeing what others don't yet see. The idea is God often gives these apostolic leaders a specific burden, a vision for what could be. The author says they can almost see, touch, and smell it, even when it doesn't exist yet.
Is that just about personality, though, being charismatic?
No, and the source is really careful about that. It's not just personality. The key is that the vision itself becomes infectious. The leader's job is to make sure the team catches that God-given vision.
Catches it, okay.
Yeah. There's a story about a team member saying their leader fueled vision, not through big meetings, but just because the leader saw it so clearly, it was palpable. They were so convinced, so undeterred, the team just caught that conviction.
That's a powerful distinction. It's the vision's clarity and the leader's conviction. Essential 3, be significantly involved in church planting and set the overall direction.
This is framed as like the main job. Team leadership is just a means to get the church planted. That's the end goal.
Right.
The source uses that phrase about putting the MPHasis on the wrong syllabable if team management becomes the focus instead of the actual mission.
Like getting so bogged down managing the team, you forget the main reason you're there.
Exactly. The author shares his own mistake in Egypt. Managing a big team became all-consuming, his language learning tanked, and he ended up feeling like an outsider to the actual planting work.
And what about that common scenario where the best church planter on the team doesn't want the leadership role because of all the admin burden.
Yeah, the advice is pretty firm. That person should still be the team leader because they have the God-given vision and gifting to set the direction and the spiritual tone.
But what about the burden?
They absolutely must delegate the bulk of the management tasks. Get a chief of staff or an associate leader who's gifted managerially. The point is, the person with the core apostolic gifting needs to be steering the ship strategically.
Got it. Okay, moving on. Essential 4. Listen.
Simple word, huge impact. We all know how it feels when someone really listens. The source asks a key question here. Do team members want to be heard more, or do they always need to get their own way?
My gut says being heard matters more.
The source agrees. It suggests if people know their input is genuinely valued and considered, they can still own those decisions even if the outcome isn't exactly what they wanted.
Right.
They get that the leader is juggling lots of factors. Knowing their voice matter is key.
Okay. Essential 5. Oversee individual team members.
This is called a special opportunity and a special obligation. The source says something pretty strong. The team leader is basically the one person on planet Earth that everyone, the team members themselves, the organization, the sending churches, expects to oversee the individual's lives and ministries.
That's a heavy responsibility.
It is. And if people are bringing financial support, it includes being their vocational supervisor, too. There's that cautionary story here as well.
About the charismatic leader.
Yes, drew a huge team, super magnetic. But after just 6 months, people got frustrated, disillusioned. The feedback was consistent. We're not getting direction. We don't know where we fit. We don't know what to do day to day.
Right.
That lack of clear oversight meant a lot of those people ended up leaving the team.
A real object lesson.
Yeah.
So, practically, what does good oversight involve?
The source suggests a reasonable oversight package. Things like brief weekly activity reporting, maybe bi-monthly one-on-one reviews, setting some hard targets semi-annually, and a bigger annual review and goal-setting session. Adjusted for part-timers, of course.
And pastoral care. Is the leader the main pastor?
The source is realistic. Leaders facilitate growth, make sure resources are there, but many pioneer types aren't naturally gifted pastors. Maybe more general Patton than Barnabas, as it says.
Right.
So if that's not your strength, you need to make sure those needs are met by others on the team or network. Lead with your gifts, but ensure the care happens. There's also a side note about maybe not inviting highly needy people onto these demanding teams in the first place.
And the importance of affirmation comes up here, too.
Hugely important. Highest value, it says. Quotes that coach, John Robinson, about never criticizing until the player knows you have unconditional confidence in them. Affirmation is a multiplier.
A multiplier. How?
The idea is a little bit of the leader's time spent encouraging and giving clear direction can seriously boost a team member's effectiveness. Like from 50% to maybe 75% or even 100%. It's a high leverage use of leader time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, final essential, number 6. Model being accountable and teachable.
This connects back to the Roman centurion in Matthew 8. He understood being under authority and having authority. The source sees a strong correlation. Leaders who are faithful and responsive to their overseers tend to get the same from their teams. Leaders who dodge accountability often face frustrations, even mutiny. So the wise leader models it.
You practice what you preach, basically.
Exactly. And that goes for teachability, too. Are you genuinely open to correction? Do you seek coaching? Or do you act like you have it all figured out? Proverbs is full of verses about listening to counsel.
Right.
The source pushes leaders. How does your team see you on this? Have they heard you admit weakness, seen you get training? If you want coachable team members, you have to model that humility. It also ties in Ephesians 5.21, be subject to one another, suggesting mutual accountability among all believers.
Okay, so those are the 6 absolute must-dos. Now back to triage. What about the other 2 categories? What gets delegated or just left undone?
Right. This is where the ruthless prioritizing really kicks in. If those 6 are non-negotiable, everything else is on the table. The source gives examples, stressing it's not a fixed list. It depends on your gifts and your team.
So what are some common things leaders should aim to delegate or let go of?
Okay. For larger teams, leading every single team activity or meeting. No way. Delegate chunks of that to an associate, a chief of staff, a leadership core. Also being involved in every little detail of church planting. Remember, essential #3 was significant involvement and direction, not doing everything yourself.
So stay strategic, but don't micromanage the execution.
Exactly. You're the main driver, the visionary, but others carry parts of the load. Another big one, being overly tied to email. The author mentions a super effective leader who only checked email twice a week, avoided discussion groups entirely.
Twice a week. That sounds almost impossible today.
It really highlights the potential cost, right? Letting email eat up time needed for the essentials. Other examples: detailed language learning supervision, get a language supervisor. And definitely team logistics and admin, especially on bigger teams. You have to delegate admin to survive.
And there was that rule of thumb for delegation.
Yeah, the friends rule. First, delegate if someone can do it 75% as well as you. Then he changed it to 50%. The point isn't perfection, it's freeing you up for your essential tasks.
What else is often delegated or left undone?
Being the main pastoral caregiver, if it's not your strength, just make sure it's covered. Getting a doctorate, the source questions if that's really necessary for most frontline planters unless they're called specifically to teaching or research. And on larger teams, personally overseeing every member. Delegate oversight of younger members to senior ones, women to senior women. The author shares a really moving story about realizing he wasn't the best fit to oversee someone and had to hand it off.
That takes real humility, recognizing your limits.
It does. And there's a caution about the residency platform, the job you do to live there. It shouldn't demand too much time. It's tempting to pour energy into it because it's tangible, gets immediate results, maybe helps support.
Unlike church planting, which can feel slow and hard.
Exactly. Church planting is described as hard, uphill, unrewarding, short-term, spiritually attacked. So leaders have to constantly pull the focus back to the main goal, especially guarding against the temptation, maybe particularly for men, the source notes, to get caught up building visible platforms instead of doing the hard spiritual work.
So triage isn't just time management, it's mission protection.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the foundation of all this: accountability and authority. Ambiguous words, the source says, but extremely important.
He uses that helicopter analogy.
Yeah, the pilot saying, I ain't done crashing yet. That's how they feel about figuring out accountability. It's ongoing. But getting the biblical framework right is vital.
Why is the biblical understanding so crucial?
Because without it, the source argues, leadership gets vague, uncertain, and profits no one. Leaders aren't sure of their role. Team members don't know how to respond. Lack of clarity here apparently causes a lot of team turmoil.
And the source brings up followership, too.
Yes, saying we need good followership as much as leadership. It notes how leaders are often distrusted today, even in the church. Quotes Dallas Willard about the Western church being in a bubble of historical illusion, shaped by Enlightenment values, happiness, freedom, and a deep suspicion of authority.
Suspicion of authority. Yeah, that feels true culturally.
It does, and it quotes Paul McCoven saying humans are basically anarchists, not followers, like sheep going their own way. The point being, independence isn't the biblical ideal. Healthy dependency on God and each other in godly structures is.
So godly leaders are actually seen as a gift, a means of grace.
Yes. And those without them are like sheep without a shepherd, which implies a kind of harshness. It forces the questions: what does the Bible actually teach? Why leaders? What's submission? What's authority? Why do we need things like reporting?
Okay, so let's get into that biblical balance. It starts with the equality passages, right?
Yeah.
Matthew 23, Mark 10.
Absolutely foundational. Jesus is clear. You are all brothers. Greatness is servanthood. He contrasts his way with how Gentile rulers lorded over people. Leadership is serving.
But that's not the whole picture in the New Testament.
No, that's the crucial point. You also have passages about structure and authority. 1 Timothy 5 talks about elders who rule well. 1 Thessalonians 5, leaders who have charge over people. Romans 12, those with the leadership gift should govern diligently. And Hebrews 13.17, obey your leaders and submit to their authority.
Those words, obey, submit, the source acknowledges they're not exactly popular.
Not at all. But the argument is these verses do apply to leadership, oversight, accountability on these teams. Leaders keep watch. They must give an account. There's real responsibility there, requiring a response.
So how do you hold those two things together? The servant equality and the call to submit. It feels like a tension.
It absolutely is a tension. And the source seems to say biblical leadership lives in that tension. It's always grounded in humble servanthood, mutual respect, our equal standing in Christ. And it recognizes that for the health and mission of the body, God sets up roles with genuine, servant-hearted authority. It's both hand.
That helps clarify.
Yeah.
Which leads to the difference between spiritual and positional authority.
Right. Positional authority is just from the role you're the leader, so people should cooperate. Spiritual authority isn't about the title. It's earned by your life, wisdom, godliness. People respond positively because they respect you.
And the source pushes back against an idea here.
Yeah, the idea that you only have to respond to spiritual authority, the source calls that a half-truth and potentially a recipe for chaos.
Why chaos?
Because if you only submit when you feel like someone has enough spiritual authority in your opinion, you're making yourself the judge. It argues that often means you're just unwilling to submit to any authority but your own preferences.
That's a sharp point. It highlights how individualism can undermine necessary structure.
It does. The source touches briefly on leadership styles, not too heavy-handed, not too passive, needs God's wisdom, but then it zeroes in on leader-to-leader accountability.
Because most people on these teams are leaders themselves.
Exactly. So it's often leader-to-leader dynamics. And Scripture expects believers to speak into each other's lives, listen to Counsel Proverbs, Ephesians 5:21 again.
And there's that powerful Acts example.
Yes, Acts 11. Peter, the top apostle, gets called on the carpet by the Jerusalem leaders after going to the Gentiles, questioned by everybody who was anybody.
It's been incredibly awkward for Peter.
Must have been really hard, the source says. But his response is key. No defensiveness, no pulling rank. He humbly explains himself, submitting to their scrutiny, trusting God. A huge example of accountability, even at the highest level.
Paul's letters are also mentioned.
Yeah, his letters to Timothy and Titus, his interactions in Acts, often very direct, in the imperative voice. He guided fellow leaders. The author shares his own story, too, getting nailed by his directors, who were friends, for slacking on reporting.
And what happened after that tough talk?
He owned up, committed to reporting faithfully, and reflects that the next couple of years were incredibly fruitful ministry-wise. That accountability moment spurred faithfulness and results.
There's also the former general director example.
Right. After leading the whole organization, he became a team leader under a younger director. And he told the younger guy, basically, keep me accountable, I need it. I'm a man under authority. It reinforces the point. Leaders should be the best at submitting, motivated by the mission.
So understanding the why behind authority is key. How does this look structurally?
Well, the source distinguishes voluntary association, like joining a mission team, a sodality, from something less voluntary, like being part of a local church, a modality. In the NT, joining teams seems voluntary, John, Mark, Paul, and Barnabas splitting.
But once you do join a team or agency,
Then the biblical principles of leadership, accountability, submission apply within that context. The source sees hints of NT networks, argues that while joining an agency isn't commanded, it's often wise for stewardship, effectiveness, Ecclesiastes 4, the three-stranded cord, and if you join, you agree to the accountability that comes with it.
how can teams make this clear from the start?
2 tools are recommended. A vision and strategy paper, what's the mission, how will we do it, and a memo of understanding. That memo spells out team life, policies, field life expectations, and the accountability structure. Helps avoid misunderstandings later.
Okay, let's get really practical. What does this ministry oversight look like day to day, say between a leader and a team member?
It's described as the main oversight relationship, and it's vertical. Leader to team member covers spiritual life, ministry work, job stuff, relevant personal issues.
What are the key functions within that relationship?
Well, the overseers doesn't have to be better at everything, but they offer the big picture view, spot potential problems, help with priorities, hold people accountable to commitments. They watch out for spiritual health and staying on task. The person being overseen needs to keep the leader informed, be transparent, not hide important stuff.
And welcome feedback.
Yes, welcome tough questions. Allow reasonable monitoring like language progress, sharing the gospel. The source says pointedly, the leader cannot manage and motivate what he or she can't measure, adding that wise management must measure the right things tied to the mission.
Measurement for mission, not just metrics.
Exactly. The overseer helps set and follow up on goals, hard targets. The subordinate should welcome being pushed out of passivity, those sins of omission from James 4. Welcome challenges to assumptions, receive exhortation, admonition, even discipline. The leader reminds them of agreements, goals, team ethos.
Given all that, why is this active oversight so crucial? What's the bottom line purpose?
The source lists practical reasons. Leaders know what's happening so they can actually help, improve, correct, connect people. It creates space for mentoring and pastoral care within that relationship. Leaders can't encourage effectively if they don't know what's going on, and lack of reporting often signals independence or hiding problems.
And that sobering observation about hidden issues when reporting breaks down.
Yeah, based on 10 years watching leaders who stopped reporting, the author says about half the time, something pretty bad is being hidden. Discouragement, conflict, even serious sin like adultery. It shows why leaders sometimes need courage to confront when accountability disappears.
Really underscores the stakes.
It does, and the ultimate reason for all this hard work of oversight and accountability, it leads to more fruitful ministry for Jesus among the unreached. The goal isn't control, it's mission effectiveness.
So as we wrap this up, the source brings in that reflection from Professor Bobby Clinton. Leadership is complex, difficult, risky. That's why it's needed. Problems are just part of the job description.
Yeah, it circles back to Romans 12.8, govern diligently. It's about stewarding your gifts well, contributing to that final, well done, good and faithful servant. Leaders must lead, passivity hurts the cause, spirit-led leadership brings life.
And the source really focuses on that word diligence, finding something unexpected there.
Yes. The author finds Paul's emphasis on diligence interesting, and his insight is this. The natural tendency of leaders, especially long-term, is passivity, not diligence.
Passivity, that seems counterintuitive for leaders.
Right. We think of them as driven. But the argument is human nature, like gravity, pulls us down. It's the drag toward avoiding hard stuff, slowness, not wanting to confront bureaucracy instead of proactive, courageous direction. It's a constant fight against inertia.
That's a really sobering thought.
It is, and it quotes a wise friend observing that leadership often feels like a real drag from the inside hassles, stress. The friend concludes, basically, it isn't worth it, at least from the standpoint of some earthly payback.
Wow. That lands hard. And the source points to 2 Corinthians 11 as a reality check on the cost and suffering involved.
Which leads to the final point. The only truly worthwhile reason for taking on this kind of leadership. It's the sheer privilege of serving Christ, knowing the real reward is from Him in the next life.
Not earthly recognition or ease.
Exactly. The final encouragement is keep that eternal reward in focus. Pray about your role, stay teachable, stay accountable, keep growing into the leader God wants you to be.
This whole deep dive really gives us so much to think about regarding leadership, especially in these tough contexts. It forces us to redefine it as humble servanthood, demanding ruthless focus via triage, grounded in the leader's own spiritual life and vision, embracing both biblical authority and accountability, and delegating like crazy to protect the mission.
And remembering the why behind all the complexity and difficulty, it's all aimed at enabling more fruitful ministry for Jesus, especially among those who haven't heard. A hard calling, but one with immense purpose.
And, think about how these ideas, humble authority, diligent service, clear accountability, ruthless focus, how they might apply beyond just these pioneer teams in any area where you're called to lead or serve with others on a mission.
That point about the natural drift towards passivity over the long haul, that really sticks with me. It's not what you usually think about leadership.
It isn't. We expect constant drive. But the idea that the sheer weight and difficulty can subtly pull even good leaders toward being less diligent, less proactive, it's a potent warning.
Makes you wonder where that subtle gravity might be pulling in your own sphere.
So for you listening right now, maybe just consider this. Where in your own life, your own work, might that gravity of long-term passivity be subtly pulling you away from diligent leadership or focused effort? And maybe, what's just one small step you could take today to push back against that pull, remembering, like the source reminds us, what the true reward really is?